If the attackers have these tools, we, the defenders, need to use these tools so that the attackers aren't finding holes we don't know about.
Getting smarter about how to use AI is one of the biggest challenges that security teams are facing today. We need it desperately for automating many aspects of cybersecurity. But if the conversation shifts to how to replace everything with AI, we're probably asking the wrong questions. My guest today, Diana Kelley from Noma Security, says the future of cybersecurity is about finding the right balance between AI and humans, not choosing between them. You're watching Security or Else. Welcome to the podcast where we explore what's hype, what's real, and what channel partners truly need to focus on next in security and AI.
Thank you for having me here. Diana Kelley, I am the Chief Information Security Officer at Noma Security.
I would love to hear your current view, up-to-the-minute perspective on how AI is impacting the threat environment.
It's impacting the threat environment in two really critical ways. One is the external. So what is AI giving to our attackers? And it's giving the ability to automate, lower their cost of doing business, do attacks when they're at sort of a lower level of skill. They're using the AI to help them skill up. A lot of folks are worried about some of the advanced models like Mythos. They get a lot of the headlines, but if you really look, attackers are using today's models to advance their adversarial attacks. So for a lot of organizations, what had been security technical debt that was not at an unacceptable risk level, now that attackers are armed with the AI, they're seeing that some of that security technical debt, they have to go and reevaluate and say, really, in this new landscape, is this debt still acceptable, or do we now have to put the time and the effort and attention to address these exposure paths and these vulnerabilities within our system? So that's one. That's big for CISOs and defenders, because it's not like we're sitting around with extra time and resources on our hands and we're like, I wish there was something for us to do, right? We're all flat out. So to have that come on, that's a big challenge. And then the other big challenge is that our internal customers are the folks that we service at our companies, the folks that work for the companies, they're adopting AI at a very, very rapid pace. And we have to, as defenders, figure out how we govern and secure that at the same time that we also figure out how we can use AI to make our jobs better. Do we enhance the tier one analysts and the SOCs with AI? Do we do it for threat hunting? All these questions. So externally, it's making a lot of big changes. And then internally, it's also really raising the bar for us as well.
You mentioned Mythos. That's just such an interesting case in terms of how they disclose that. Obviously, there are some advantages of having these models to be able to find vulnerabilities, but if attackers can already find vulnerabilities with existing AI tools, as you mentioned, maybe that's not the ultimate purpose of Mythos to actually improve our security.
Well, yeah, I'm hoping that companies are looking at headlines around models like Mythos and instead of just saying, well, we can use it, we can't use it, or panicking. Panic is always, we don't make our best decisions when we're panicking, that they just really understand that models are, in fact, getting better trained to be able to write code and to be able to find out where there are vulnerabilities in code. So rather than just worrying about Mythos specifically or panicking, I'm really hoping that organizations are looking at what's happening with AI in a very strategic way for defense and, understanding how the attackers are using it. And that they're saying, back to that point I was making earlier, how can we use it? So if the attackers have these tools that they can use to find out where our weaknesses are, whether it's in our software or within the exposure path within our organization, or it's chaining together vulnerabilities in our software, right? If the attackers have these tools, we, the defenders, need to use these tools before they're using them or as they're using them so that we can find where those issues and those holes and those exposures are, and we can create plans on how to address them so that the attackers aren't finding holes we don't know about, but we're using the tools to find them and then address those exposures. So I really, really hope that that's when people are looking at Mythos, instead of being, oh my gosh, scary and AI Skynet and everything that the sky is falling, that it's really more, here are these advanced tools. These are how the attackers are using them. This is how we as defenders can use them. And this is how we can start putting a strategy in place to make sure that we are addressing the vulnerabilities and exposures at our company.
It also just seems like the awareness that it raised, I mean, that could be potentially construed as beneficial. It certainly got people's attention, even if maybe not everyone is necessarily always having exactly the right takeaways from Mythos and what that has brought into the world.
That's a really great point, that turning some of this headline awareness, because all of a sudden boards were asking about it, and the top C-suite was asking about it. So looking at AI as security and what does this mean to us, and I think that's just such a wonderful framing that you have, which is like, we as CISOs, as defenders, what can we do? How can we use that to have a better conversation, especially in some ways about security hygiene and legacy tech debt? Because that is not like a super sexy topic that everybody wants to talk about. And this is really our opportunity to say, this is why it matters. And it actually is really critical to business risk now.
Do you still see organizations, teams out there thinking that we're going to throw humans at this problem and that's going to be able to address it?
What I'm seeing is a maturity that's coming. So there was also that sort of other side of the coin, right? Some people are saying, oh, well, we need to have a human still do everything, or we're not going to trust yet. There's the other side of the coin where there were some companies that were going, get rid of all the people, just put AI on it. AI will do everything. And what's happening is, as so many things in life, is that we're starting to see sort of this more coming to more of a middle state where having humans do 100% of the analysis, we just can't keep up. There's just too much data, too many alerts going. We do need to automate a lot of that review, but automate it in a careful and very thoughtful way, and not just say, okay, well, AI is going to do everything. As anybody who's used AI, you can see it can go off the rails. It can drift. It can get out of alignment. When we're using agentic AI, the agents, that can happen to them too. So companies are realizing that just replacing everybody with an agent or, new skills is not necessarily the way, but also having just humans and not using any automation is also not really. So we're seeing more of this sort of bringing it together.
I know Noma works with solution providers and MSPs. Yes. I would love to hear what you think they should be paying most attention to, where they should be focusing in the middle of all of this.
We are so grateful for our channel partners, because they know their customers, they know the territory, and they are creating this really good bridge between what the product and the platform does and then how to really operationalize that. And you've got to know your customer, you got to know who you're working with in order to understand what that operationalizing it effectively is going to mean for them. And that's where a lot of the channel is coming in, is they're looking at what are adoption patterns that can be rolled out to different cohorts and different sectors to ensure that they're going to get the best value. I mean, at one level, everybody's got to do sort of the same path, right? We need our visibility. We need to apply access control, testing, runtime. That's a path that most companies are going down with their AI governance. But then it gets very, very, when you say access control, it's like, sure, that's 2 words. That's easy. But access control is a huge, it's a huge, what are you doing with the agents that you're controlling? What are you doing with the AI that you're deploying out? What does access look like for them for this, very high level? If you're putting out a chatbot, if you're putting out an agent that's going to be writing code, if you're putting out an agent that's going to be patching systems, these are different risk tiers and different levels. Will it touch financial or not? That's where those adoption patterns really come into play. And that's where channels are really shining, and why we are so grateful to work with such great channel partners, is that they know the customer, so they can really help them on those deep operational patterns that are unique to the customer to employ that see it, access control, test it, and runtime.
With your background in security, you've seen multiple different waves of new trends. Is there anything that you think in the midst of this is just very overhyped, even if it's just an aspect of the AI picture here, that you think is not necessarily the thing to be focusing on over the long term?
I really do feel the complete the complete replacement of people. I'm not saying that there aren't aspects of anyone's jobs that may be more akin to being automated out and creating additional efficiency. But the whole, I'm going to just run an entire company with one human being and everything's AI. I think that was a little bit overhyped for most organizations. I do know somebody who's actually running a company that way. But I think for a lot of organizations, I mean, let's say if we're talking to like one of my former employers like Microsoft, yeah, I don't think it's just going to be Satya Nadella and a bunch of agents. So I don't think that's the future. So I think the other thing is that this concept of we call it artificial intelligence. And that makes people, I think, believe, and we often say the models are getting better and they're getting smarter. Well, the models are getting better trained. And most of the time, a lot of that training is coming from humans. What are they getting trained on? Data that was created by humans. If AI gets trained on AI generated data, you get something called model collapse, where it actually stops working. It's not effective anymore. The model stops being able, first it sort of moves more and more to the center. It loses all the beautiful edge cases, the black swan events of knowledge, and then the knowledge itself just sort of collapses in on itself. So it's trained by humans. It is the models are trained by humans on human generated data. So it's not that these AI are like off cooking things up and getting so much smarter. The models are getting better for us to use because human beings have figured out how we're using them and how they can be more effectively used. They then train the model and put better data into the model. If people just kind of feeling like these are these things that are just off getting so much smarter than us, and really this is incredibly advanced and useful software that human beings are training and making even better for use. But it's us that is the intelligence.
How important do you think startups are in this cybersecurity wave that we're in right now with AI, compared to even maybe a few years ago? Has the importance of the startup, gone up in this environment?
I strongly believe that. I've been in IT for almost 40 years, and there's been this pattern again and again and again, which is the big companies ultimately, as a technology matures, adopt the security controls for it and put it out. But the early phases of innovation are in the startups. And that's specifically why I joined Protect AI, because that was where they were just so ahead of the curve. That is why the company, I was employee 11. It was a fantastic ride. And, I understand why Palo, acquired us to bring us into the Palo platform. But I'm at Noma because there's still a lot of innovation to go. As security technology is adopted, the innovation occurs in the startups. They get very focused on just that problem. They don't have to worry about legacy customers and all that. We can really focus on what needs to happen right now from the ground up on a green field.
When it comes to cybersecurity industry overall, there's always debates. What would be a controversial opinion that you have about AI and security right now?
I don't know if it's controversial, but as we look at where the risks are in AI, you'll see a lot of headlines with, oh, now an agent has deleted a database. Oh, and now we've got an agent we've got an attack that's using the guardrails and the resources, and it's just creating this like complete resource exhaustion. And now we've got an attack that's exfiltrating sensitive data out of a database. But if you look under the covers, every single one of those was a form of indirect prompt injection, maybe indirect prompt injection with some other vulnerabilities or configuration errors or exposures in the company. But it's the underlying what changed the model output was the indirect prompt injection. And I wish that more people were looking at how do we create guardrails around that trust boundary of what's going in so that we don't allow indirect prompt injection or unwanted data, or we do our best to not let unwanted data get to the LLM that's doing the inference that we're going to act on. And then also, obviously, we have to do runtimes downstream, runtime protection downstream. But that upstream, looking at the trust boundary of what's going into the context window, I think a lot of people are sort of following these headlines and they're getting really overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, AI's got a problem everywhere. Instead of understanding that a lot of these attacks really start with the hygiene of what's going into the context window. So I wish more people would understand that LLMs, which is what drives agentic, drives modern, and what people think of as modern AI, they're non-deterministic. And what comes out, their output. So you don't know. I could give it the same input and it would give me different output. They're also probabilistic. And they can't separate the authority of the instructions that are going into the context window. So something untrusted from an attacker and something trusted from you, the system builder or the customer, is going to be treated the same way by the context window. Even though they've tried to train them to trust this, not that, it's still that this is how LLMs work. So I wish more people would understand that, because I'm not saying anything bad about LLMs. That's just how the architecture is. But I think it would help people to feel a little bit less overwhelmed by these seemingly nonstop headlines of attack and a little bit more focused and strategic on understanding how we keep upstream hygiene and trust boundaries clear, or as clear as possible, and then what we do on that downstream runtime boundary to make sure that we're not exposing our data or our information.
Looking at the future, I know that probably this is one of the hardest times to predict or have firm expectations about where things are going in security. But if you're looking out 6 to 12 months, what are some of the biggest things that you feel most confident about that we're going to see, especially as it relates to how AI is impacting security?
Attackers are very good. I learned this when I was working with X-Force at IBM. Attackers are incredibly good at sharing data and sharing information, and they're gonna get better at using AI. That's to find vulnerabilities. So we really do need to look at our hygiene and address that. So I think we're going to continue to see more and more proof of attacks coming that adversaries have been using AI for. On the defender side, the Gartner, the hype cycle, and then you get to the trough of the despair, and then you get to where it's sort of the running. Some people are coming off of this high of AI is going to solve all of our problems, and we're going to see more realistic use cases. So we will see increased agentic adoption, but it's going to be with strategic, careful approaches that organizations are going to be testing and putting these out with controls, rather than where some companies did initially, which was just like, the agent's going to figure it out. And they found out that the agent figures it out, and sometimes it does amazing, and sometimes it puts a very sensitive API key in an image and sends it to another agent for access. So I think we'll see more control and more strategic adoption at organizations of AI.
Well, Diana Kelley, thank you so much for being here. This was a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. It was great to speak to you.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed, you can like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And join us next time as we explore what's hype, what's real, and what channel partners truly need to focus on next in security, or else.